So maybe you're thinking of buying that lift kit that's on sale right now. Or maybe you've already installed it and you're ready to conquer anything. But are those all the parts you needed? Well, I might want wheels and tires. That's not what I mean. Actually, there are a few other parts that you might need to consider when lifting your Subaru, and one of them might not be that obvious. When installing your lift kit, you may find you need to disconnect your sway bars in order to install your lift. When you go back to reconnect them, the distance that the mounting location is from the sway bar is much further away. Typically in this situation you have two options. The first is either to remove your sway bars completely, which depending on your lift kit you might actually have to. And the second option is to reconnect them, and thankfully there is a part just for that. On the Adventure Wagon, I am running Anderson Design and Fabrication front relocation brackets and rear lateral link brace kit. Anderson Design Fab has these two kits from the second generation Subaru Forester, and that is it, unfortunately. Whether you own a newer or older Subaru, that is okay because you can always upgrade your ENDLINKS to more heavier duty ones or even adjustable to help account for that distance change. On the Adventure Wagon, I'm running both to help keep stress off of the ENDLINKS. One of the biggest nightmares of a lifted Subaru is CV axles going bad. But it's not the CVs that go bad, at least not first. It's actually the CV boots that go bad, which then lead to your axle CVs wearing out. The higher the lift, the more stress is on those CVs. By putting your axles in this level of stress, the boots will stretch out and possibly tear. Now, the only time I've actually ever experienced a torn CV boot was during a suspension install, which wasn't a lifted one, I might add. While installing your lift kit, you may experience the CV at the transmission and then the axle pop out of its cup. Don't worry, it's not a big deal. Just do your best and be careful and try to work that CV joint back into the cup. I did have a CV axle go bad once, but it was actually at the wheel end of the CV axle, and the axle just needed to be replaced because it was time to be replaced. It wasn't during any sort of install or anything like that. You can always have a couple CV boots or even axles handy, but sometimes axles can get expensive. But you can also upgrade your CV boots as well. I haven't used aftermarket boots personally, but Brian Lipke will recommend Flex Boot FB3000 Universal CV boots on Amazon. Just a quick note on axles, don't go buy ones in AutoZone or Amazon or anything like that. They won't last many trail runs. You should really stick with OEM, or if you want to save a little bit of money, you can get Napa's NCV axle instead. Now, the last part is something that most people might not think about, but if you want that new wheel and tire setup, or even if you don't, you want to keep camber in mind. Subarus have independent suspension, which means each wheel will react independently of one another. If your sway bars aren't connected, they will be even more independent. Because of this, modifications to your suspension height will result in what is known as camber, which is the angle of which your wheel sits when looking at the tread side of a wheel. If you have a lift that is less than 2 inches, you'll be able to get away with camber bolts. Subarus usually come with front ones from the factory, while they usually don't have them in the rear. White Line and Primitive Racing make a set for a good price, and all you need to do is swap the stock bolts with the cambered ones. If you have more than a 2-inch lift, you may need more than just a couple bolts. For the front, you might need cambered top hats. These replace the top hats on your struts, and depending on what orientation you install them in, that will affect camber and caster. For the rear, you may need these adjustable rear control arms. This is for the right side. I've already done the left. Well, I'm going to show you how to do the right ones, and these allow for adjustment to help with that camber issue. I will be posting a longer video of this install probably in the next video, but we'll just do a quick overview right now of what we need to do to replace these. To install these control arms, it is pretty straightforward. The first thing we want to do is lift the car up and put a jack stand underneath, then we can remove our wheel. From there, it is 3 bolts. There's one long bolt that connects both control arms to the hub in the back. Well, we're in the back, but you get the idea. Then we can remove the rear subframe bolt. That rear bolt you might need to remove first before you take the big bolt out, just because sometimes there are some binding issues with the rear arm and the long bolt that goes through the hub. There's a couple washers. A cam washer is one of them, so make sure you don't lose that. Once we have that bolt out, we can remove the rear control arm the rear control arm, I guess is the way you would say it. But then we can hammer out the long bolt with the control arm together, and then it wiggles out no problem. Then we just remove the front bolt, which is very hard to get to. You can see I barely fit my ratchet in there. And you can remove the axles, but that's a process in of itself, so I tried to avoid it. Then once we remove everything, we just put the new control arms in, make sure they are adjusted to the same length as your previous control arms. You're going to have to get an alignment anyway, but we put the car back together, put the wheel back on, lower it, torque everything to its proper specifications, and then we are done. Now, we talked a lot about parts to install along with your lift kit in this video. If you want to learn how to install a lift kit yourself, you can check that out right here.